So
I
a
love
few
it.
things that I want to say about this article that came out, I sent it over to you, was from the Atlantic Monthly. And I think we'll be talking about, I think the DEI community will be talking about it a lot. So, first of all, just as a premise, right? So the DEI field, when I first started, it struck me as something that was much too wedded to training to be impactful, right?
Yeah.
I thought that it was too reliant on training. I didn't feel like there's enough focus on data, on strategy, and on impact. And that's what led me into this work. And my co-host, Nadia, who's normally here, she's a learning development specialist. And she also says that you can't rely on training to solve all your problems, right? And so
Yeah.
she's very fond of saying that. But that said, the piece that came out from the Atlantic, which had the main point that DEI, the industry itself, is ineffective, was garbage.
Yeah.
I thought it was an awful piece.
Yeah.
It was lazy. I thought it was intellectually dishonest. And it was a big, wet French kiss to right-wing legislators
Yeah.
that
Sure.
want to, across the country that are working to make DEI go away. Right. And so, so why was it trash? Right. So two quick things. And then I have many more, and I'll probably
Oh,
go
let's talk
into,
another 25 minutes on this. Let's do it.
but it equates DEI consultants with anti-bias and diversity training,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Can't do
too
that.
lazy to make that distinction, whether the writer and the editors did not understand that distinction or were too lazy
Seemed like they
to
needed
make
to
that.
go into some DEI training themselves.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, exactly. Well, he also complains about the fact that he had to sit through it. So I mean, like
Ah,
this is
yeah.
this is who we're dealing with in the writer. But so training is a piece of an overall consulting puzzle, right? So consulting is you're trying to develop strategy, you're trying to make things better, you're trying to create equity in the workplace and better work environments. It's a piece of it. It's not the entire industry. I thought it was just incredibly lazy. And then it also makes the point. So one of the premises that the response to the George Floyd murder should never have been to work to create equity inside of corporations, but rather the focus had been on helping poor people. And so stop right there. Like we live in the United States of America, right? Like everything about our country is corporatist.
Yeah. Right.
Everything revolves around corporations. If you remember, Mitt Romney wanted to make corporations people in
Yeah. Yeah.
2012,
That's right. Yeah.
right? He loved his corporations.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time in corporations, as you know. I always tell my wife, who's always been a healthcare worker, that there's people inside those big gray boxes that we call corporations that make $150,000 a year and they can't even tie their shoes, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right. Right. For
and
sure.
I'm not speaking euphemistically, like, oh, they're really bad at their job. Like, no, they actually can't even tie their shoes
Yeah.
and they make $150,000 a year, right? And so these are the jobs that so overwhelmingly go to unimpressive white men, right? So that's who's overrepresented in those roles. And those are the types of roles you need in order to lift people out of
Yeah. Right.
poverty
Right.
to the middle class, from the middle class to the upper middle class, and then
Yeah.
finally to the wealthy, right? These are the roles that allow you to buy a Tesla, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
Right.
need those to be distributed equitably. To say that this is not important in creating equity in society is to not understand American society or the disparities that exist within those corporations.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have
Cool.
so much more on this. Said
Yeah, no.
I thought it was horrible.
Can I ask one question, or maybe it'll lead to an additional rant? But like, aren't it said 24 billion is being spent on initiatives and whatnot. Aren't we like
Mm,
just in the early innings of this whole thing? Like doesn't transformation and change take a while? Or like I guess were these leaders thinking that like overnight, they would change hundreds of years of systemic racism and all sorts of issues?
there's a kernel of, in terms of the argument. I mean, so there's this piece where people within the DI industry think that there's things that could be done better, right? And so,
Yeah,
like, if there's one criticism, it is that leaders decided that we were going to throw money at the problem through a lot of the things that the writer points out, right?
sure.
And we're going to do bias training, and we're going to spend a lot of money, and we're going to give a 1 hour seminar or a half day seminar, and people are going to go back to their desks, and that's going to change things. And so that that is fair game, right? And so that is laziness from corporate leaders that I think that it's justifiable to criticize that. However, like you say, that is the starting point. And, we're getting a heck of a lot smarter in how we attack inequity within corporations. And it talks about how much money is being made. It's expensive. I can tell you, I meet a lot of folks that work in this industry. There's no big DEI bag like waiting for you, right? Like if you
Yeah, right,
like,
right. Yeah.
you know, I can count on one hand, and I mean like there's literally one person I've met in my work that I felt was disingenuous
Yeah.
in what we're trying to do. Most people are working really hard to try to make change, and so yes, so
But
yeah, it
I
did
think
lead to another
also
rant.
I think also as we found out from our story at the top, like not investing in this is also expensive in terms of lawsuits and just being a shitty corporate employer and all sorts of stuff. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.